The rain battered the cracked pavement outside the orphanage, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the ache in Lila's chest. At 17, she was too old for fairy tales, yet she clutched a tattered notebook filled with stories she'd written for the younger kids, stories of heroes, hope, and homes that never came. Tonight she was hours from aging out of the system, her future a blank page she couldn't bear to write. As she stared out the window, a sleek black car pulled up, its headlights slicing through the storm. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his face unreadable, and Lila's world tilted. She didn't know it yet, but this was the night everything would change. Lila had grown up in the shadows of St. Mary's Orphanage, a crumbling building in a forgotten corner of the city. Her days were filled with chores, her nights with whispered stories to the younger children, their wide eyes drinking in every word. She was their light, their dreamer, though her own dreams had long since faded. Her only keepsake was her mother's necklace, a simple silver locket she never opened, afraid it would stir memories too painful to face. But Lila was a survivor, her heart stitched together with stubborn hope, even if it flickered like a dying candle. The man in the suit was Victor Hargrove, a name that carried weight in the city. A tech mogul worth billions, his empire spanned software to skyscrapers, but his wealth couldn't buy what he wanted most: his son's voice. 10-year-old Ethan Hargrove hadn't spoken a word since his mother's death 3 years ago. A tragedy that had locked him in a silent world no doctor or therapist could breach. Victor's desperation had led him to St. Mary's, where he'd heard of a girl who could reach anyone with her stories. His offer was as cold as it was staggering. "Make my son talk and I'll adopt you. You'll have a family, a future, everything." Lila stood in the orphanage's drafty common room, her worn sneakers squeaking on the linoleum as Victor laid out his terms. The other kids watched from the stairs, their whispers buzzing like static. She felt the weight of their envy, their hope, their fear. A family? For her, a girl who'd been passed over for years? It was a lifeline, but it came with a price. Ethan, small and pale, sat in the corner, his dark eyes fixed on the floor, a puzzle no one could solve. Lila's heart twisted. She saw herself in him, a child carrying a wound too big for words. "I'm not a miracle worker," Lila said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But I'll try." Victor's gaze was steel. "You have 1 month. If you fail, you're out with nothing." The challenge was daunting. Ethan was a fortress, his silence a wall built from grief. Lila spent her first day simply sitting near him, reading aloud from her notebook. Her stories were vivid, tales of dragons who guarded broken hearts, of stars that whispered secrets to lost children. Ethan didn't look up, but his fingers twitched, a tiny crack in his armor. Lila noticed, her hope flickering brighter. Days turned into weeks, and Lila poured herself into reaching Ethan. She learned his routines, how he'd trace patterns in the air when anxious, how he'd linger near the piano in the Hargrove mansion but never touch the keys. The mansion itself was a maze of marble and glass, a stark contrast to the orphanage's peeling walls. Victor watched her every move, his impatience palpable, but Lila ignored him. Her focus was Ethan, and she began to weave him into her stories. There was a boy, she'd say, who held a whole universe in his silence, waiting for the right moment to let it out. The first breakthrough came on a rainy afternoon. Lila, frustrated after hours of one-sided storytelling, set her notebook aside and hummed a tune her mother used to sing. Ethan's head lifted, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. It wasn't words, but it was something, a thread of connection. Lila clung to it, her heart racing. She began incorporating music into her stories, singing softly as she described enchanted forests or brave nights. Ethan started to lean closer, his fingers tapping rhythms on his knees. But the pressure was relentless. Victor's deadlines loomed, and whispers from the orphanage staff reached Lila's ears. "She's just a charity case. She'll never do it." Doubt crept in, gnawing at her resolve. What if she failed? What if Ethan's silence was a lock she couldn't pick? Late at night, alone in the guest room Victor had provided, Lila would clutch her locket, whispering to her mother's memory for strength. "I'm trying, Mama. I'm trying." The real challenge wasn't just Ethan's silence. It was the weight of everyone's expectations. Victor's cold pragmatism clashed with Lila's warmth, creating tension that crackled like static. One evening, he cornered her in the mansion's library. "You're running out of time," he said, his voice sharp. "I need results, not fairy tales." Lila's temper flared. "He's not a project, Mr. Hargrove. He's a boy who's hurting. Maybe if you listened to him instead of demanding he speak, you'd see that." Victor's face darkened, but he said nothing, stalking away. Lila's words lingered. A seed planted. She didn't know if they'd take root, but she couldn't stop now. Ethan was counting on her, even if he couldn't say it. The turning point came unexpectedly. Lila found an old music box in the attic, its melody hauntingly familiar. When she played it for Ethan, his eyes widened, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. Lila's heart stopped. She recognized the tune from her own childhood, a lullaby her mother had sung. "Did your mom sing this too?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, the first real response he'd given. Lila's throat tightened. They were linked by loss, by music, by something deeper than words. She began using the music box daily, pairing it with stories about a boy who found his voice in the songs of the stars. Ethan started to hum along, faint at first, then stronger. One evening, as the melody filled the room, he whispered, "Mama." One word, fragile but real. Lila froze, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't push him, didn't rush to tell Victor. This was Ethan's moment, not a trophy to flaunt. But Victor found out. The next day he summoned Lila to his study. "You did it," he said, his voice gruff but softer than before. "One word, it's a start." He paused, studying her. "You're not what I expected." Lila met his gaze. "Neither are you." The final week was a whirlwind. Ethan's whispers grew into short sentences, each one a victory. Lila taught him to play simple notes on the piano, their hands brushing as they shared the music. Victor began joining them, hesitant at first, then with a warmth Lila hadn't thought possible. He told stories of his own, awkward, halting tales of Ethan's mother, of love and loss. Lila saw the man behind the millionaire. A father as broken as his son. On the last day of the month, Ethan spoke a full sentence. "I want Lila to stay." The room fell silent, Victor's eyes glistening. Lila's heart swelled. She'd done it, not for the promise of adoption, but for Ethan. She'd given him back his voice, and in doing so, found her own. Victor kept his word. He began the adoption process, but Lila surprised everyone with her response. "I don't need a family on paper," she said, her voice steady. "I found one here, with Ethan, with you. But I want to keep helping kids like him, kids like me. Use your money to fix the orphanage, give them a chance." The room was stunned. Victor, for once, was speechless. Then he nodded, a rare smile breaking through. "You're a force, Lila. We'll do it together." The story spread like wildfire. Local news covered the orphanage's renovation, funded by Victor's foundation. With Lila at its heart, she started a storytelling program for traumatized children, using music and words to heal. Ethan became her shadow, his laughter a melody that filled the halls. Victor, too, changed. He listened more, loved harder, and found joy in the small moments. Lila never opened her locket. She didn't need to. Her mother's love lived in her stories, her songs, her courage. She'd come to the Hargrove mansion seeking a home, but she'd built one, not just for herself, but for every child who needed hope. As the sun set over the renovated orphanage, Lila stood on its steps, Ethan's hand in hers. The rain had stopped, and the sky was a canvas of stars. She whispered a new story, one about a girl who turned her pain into power, who found a family not in promises, but in purpose. And somewhere, in the rustle of the wind, she swore she heard her mother's voice, singing along.